You're good.
All right. Hi. I've been asked to speak about the impact of brain injury on family and caregivers today. And it is a very broad topic. So when I was planning this little talk, I was thinking about imparting some things that I thought would be important as people leave and start the process of adjusting themselves. And there's actually some new research from the University of Vermont Medical School dealing specifically with caregivers with people who had traumatic brain injuries. And one of the most interesting and important discoveries is that over a period of time, if adjustment is not going well for caregivers, they themselves are more likely to experience cognitive issues, things like attention, concentration, working memory, and delayed memory, even if they're healthy. And I think that's important for a couple of different reasons. One, I think it's important to reassure caregivers, and now I do it even sort of preemptively before they even have issues, that this is something that they might experience as they're sort of adjusting to this new life. And it normalizes it. Plus, I assure, in fact, that if there's nothing else going on with them medically, that this is something that is reversible as their adjustment improves, so will their cognitive functioning. But third, and I think most importantly, I think it's a good diagnostic indicator of how they're making their adjustment, because we tend to experience problems with things like attention and concentration behaviors before we're even aware of it, before things like depression or anxiety enter the picture. And if that's the case, and they can be aware of this, they can start to see how they're adjusting. And that's good because they can manage it when the problem is small rather than large, because when you start recognizing this link between the two and the depression gets too great, then it becomes a snowball and then the cognitive issues get worse. So I do this almost all the time now, because in the past, it's been very common that I've been working with a family member and that family member's walked up to me and said, by the way, I'm starting to worry about myself. And so it's good to, it's reassuring now to have this research that this is a natural, normal, reversible part of this process. And it's a good indicator of their own adjustment. So that being said, we want to focus on how we can start the adjustment process. Very complicated new life. So what we want to do is the same thing that we do here. We want to work with both the patient and the caregiver to start becoming more adjusted by reaching some goals. And this is something that we do automatically. We do it in so many different ways in all the disciplines, whether it's nursing, whether it's occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy. So we want to start teaching them to be their own therapists through this process. So what we tend to do, or what I like to do, is the SMART goal approach, because it's an easy acronym to remember. So who hasn't sort of been working with the patient and a family member and ask them what their goal is? And if they say their goal is to have their old life back, well, believe it or not, that's not a goal. That's a description. What we have to do is take that description and turn it into a goal, something specific. So what does it mean to have your old life back? Well, that meant I used to go to the park every day. See, there's something specific right there. And then what did you used to do when you would go to the park? Well, I used to walk for 15 minutes or feed the birds or whatever it is. And that's something that becomes specific and measurable. So you can walk for 15 minutes, you can walk for a distance, you can walk for steps or whatever it might be. Anything you can measure through time so that we know we're comparing apples to apples and being specific. Because if the goals are not measurable and they're ambiguous, people are going to feel like they're not making any progress. So we want to make sure that they can see for themselves and decide for themselves whether they feel good about that progress. So once we help the caregiver and the patient go from specific to measurable, we want to also double check to make sure that the goals for where they are right now are attainable, something within their grasp. If it's not, what we say is that we work towards that being a next part of this process. So specific to measurable to relevant. And relevance is important in two different ways. It has to be relevant to both the patient and the caregiver, because if not, someone's not going to be consistent through this process, and that's really important. But it also has to be relative to the larger goal in general. So it has to be related. It has to be part of what B.F. Skinner would talk about, a behavioral chain, which is taking something very complicated and breaking it down into very small increments. And in order to achieve that, we also have to make sure that those things are time-based, and sort of the reinforcer and the time before or between the action and the ability to do it is reinforced so that it becomes more succinct. And what happens if not, both the caregiver and or the patient become frustrated, quit, or feel like they're not making progress, even if they are making progress. And to me, that's one of the most frustrating things when people don't see the progress themselves. And that way, if we're recording this, we're keeping track of it, we can show them demonstratively that there has been progress through this process. And if it's not working, we can start to figure out where this plan is not working, it's failed, so we can revise it, start over again, and go through that process, and sort of also reinforce or sort of help make it known and sort of relevant that failure is part of this process, and that part of it is trial and error through this process, and that's part of the adjustment itself.